All right, welcome in for this week's edition of Unsafe Spaces with me, Randy Cross. Want to thank you for joining us and remind you any suggestions or as far as segments and whatnot for the show, articles, crazy stories, send them to producer@unsafespacesUSA.com. All right, this last week was pretty incredible, and it's worth taking a look back on what exactly happened. Pretty amazing. Okay, first story that really caught my attention was the British Open. Great event. Jordan Spieth had the lead, looked like he was a sure winner. Suddenly the guy gets down by a stroke and then proceeds to go birdie, eagle, birdie, and win himself the claret jug and win the British Open. The third leg, as the headline says, of the Grand Slam. This kid is an incredibly talented player. Oh, everybody knows he can putt like crazy, especially from medium to long distance. But at times when his game is right, it seems like, especially in a big match, he can win anytime he really feels like it. Next up from what the week was it's Hollywood related. The big news about Hollywood this last week was A, a hit, and B, a flop. The hit, Dunkirk. Story about the Allied, British, mainly, evacuation of the European continent, getting the hell out of Dodge before the Germans got there, and everything that happened around that, what really was a tragedy. Made over $50 million in its debut weekend. Now, on the other end of that was Valerian. Valerian, very much anticipated. Luc Besson is the filmmaker in this case. Had done The Fifth Element, also a film that was not very widely acclaimed when it came to the box office early on. That turned into a cult classic. So I guess his hope is that this will do the same thing. Criticisms were, it was overproduced. It was too much just CGI. Couldn't be because they used an actress who was a model, had never really done much acting. That couldn't have anything to do with it. If you're going to spend $225 million on a movie like this, why not hire somebody that can act? That might not be a bad place to start. But Valerian, tough start. $225 million. You take in 17 your first weekend. Your financial backers are already taking write-offs. Let's put it that way. Next up on the list of what happened last week is very simply a crazy event that happens every year, and you could probably go every city and every kind of weird, strange event. But this is called Comic-Con, and it happens down in San Diego at the Convention Center. And you can see a little bit of everything. You can see a Captain America. Yeah, I mean, you can see these, kind of cosplay-looking characters. You get a little Ariel, the Little Mermaid. You get the characters from Guardians of the Galaxy. People dress up. Yes, that is an adult. Kind of hard to believe, but that is an adult being Batman for a weekend. And it's just, I love it. You look at a newspaper, you go online. People like to sort of check out and get into these kind of characters, and it's fantastic. It's part of what made last week kind of fun. Right now, I want to talk about another news item that is going to be my monologue for the week. Very simply, it has to do with the one and only Kid Rock. Kid Rock from Michigan, from the Detroit area, a guy that's been a rocker, guy that's been very non-apologetic, is going to run for U.S. Senator in the state of Michigan. And it's been greeted by grunts and groans on one side, oohs and ahs on another side. And generally speaking, the first impression of most people is not, this guy must be crazy. This must be a publicity stunt. People are saying, this guy actually could do it. Welcome to the new political reality after a guy like Donald Trump has done what he's done. But just try to study history a little bit, just a little bit. Politicians were temporary jobs. Politicians were meant never to be professional jobs. So it was the cobbler, it was the bartender, it was the mayor, it was the sheriff, it was the farmer. They took jobs on to go to a legislature type area to become politicians. People don't get that anymore. And it's part of what made, Kid Rock such a pretty hot item news-wise that was covered not only nationally, but covered pretty heavily on the local scene.
Rockin' Capitol Hill, Kid Rock confirming that he is making a run for the Senate in Michigan. The musician took to Twitter yesterday writing this: "I have had a ton of emails and texts asking me if this website is real. The answer is an absolute yes. If Kid Rock wins, he would be the first Republican candidate to win the Senate seat since 1998.
It's just the term Republican and a picture of Kid Rock don't quite go together. But hey, God bless you. Have fun. Hope you can do some great things for the people of Michigan, because goodness knows they need it. They need a lot of help up there. There is no doubt about that. All right, let's go to the next segment of our show, which is my favorite, and that is Butthurt of the Week in our Matador. No, thank you. About anything. Our number one Butthurt of the Week story is something that if you're in the world of sports and you didn't know about this story, you were either under a rock or at multiple media days and just didn't have time to look at a phone, to look at the internet, to look at a TV, because the University of Mississippi, shortly before camp starts, shortly before the season starts, relieved their head coach, Hugh Freeze, of his job. He came out later this past week and had a little comments to make about what's gone on in his life, what it is to leave a job like this and the kind of disgrace that he did. It's hard to explain. I'm glad I don't have young kids right now, because trust me, this is not a very nice story, especially of a guy that was known as a very religious figure. Check out this news story.
Well, it's officially over, and the details we're about to share, not what you'd expect from a man notorious for his faith. Rebels athletic director Ross Bjork telling ESPN that school officials found a pattern of phone calls to a number associated with the female escort service. USA Today reported that Freeze made a 1-minute call from a university-issued phone to a number associated with the female escort service. That number was found during a discovery related to former Ole Miss coach Houston Nutt's civil lawsuit against the school and Freeze, which was filed in federal court last week. Ole Miss AD Ross Bjork told ESPN that once the university officials dove deeper into Freeze's phone records, they found more of a pattern with phone calls of that nature.
Yeah, I don't want to bring the world of drug trafficking and whatnot into the world of sports any more than it already gets drug in. But all I have to say about that from Hugh Freeze is, dude, have you never heard of a burner phone? You've never been in a 7-Eleven, a Quick Trip, a BP gas station? Those things are all over the place. And you used a school telephone? That is just nuts. I'm not condoning it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying do that, but use a burner phone. But there are ways around this. Come on. Wow. Oof. Next up, the Dallas wide receiver, Lucky Whitehead, or in this case, not so lucky. He's had a pretty rough last week or so. First, he was in Florida, and somehow he loses his pit bull, his dog, and the dog is then held for ransom. He doesn't pay the ransom, but he gets his dog back. Then his name pops back up in the news as being arrested for shoplifting at like a convenience store. As it turns out, it wasn't him. But before all the "it wasn't him" news came out, the Dallas Cowboys kind of raised their hands and said, "We're good. We're done. We're through with Lucky Whitehead," or not so lucky Whitehead. They released him. Then his week got weird. And then his week got nasty. He got picked up by the New York Jets. Does it get any lower than that? You're going to play for the Jets? and you're a receiver, who's going to throw to you? Who's the last successful Jets quarterback? I'll answer my own question. Mark Sanchez, before he actually blew his cover, was in some AFC championship games. Lucky Whitehead, New York Jets. Good luck. And keep a chain on that dog because it's not real safe there either. All right, next up on the hit parade is our guy here. Got to mention him every once in a while. I've met him personally. He's pretty affable, very quirky personality, and I can confirm from my meeting is yes, he does smoke weed. But Snoop Dogg, he's got a new job doing a little online streaming of fights and TV streaming of fights, working with Uriah Faber and getting the fights online. He described his perfect job. Uriah Faber actually described Snoop's job. He says, well, he drinks a little gin and juice, has a few blunts, and watches fights. Does it get any better than that? And I got to tell you, this is one heck of a job. Check this out.
I think I smell him.
He's coming.
He'll be in here in just a sec. All right, here we go. Here's the entry of the man. Whoa! Hey, yeah, this is TMZ.
What it do?
What's up? What's up?
The champ is here. What up, dog?
So, you guys want to talk over to Snoop or what?
A little bit.
Did you talk to TMZ?
Yeah.
All right, that's a money shirt. I need one of those shirts.
Man, this is too fun, man. We having so much fun. It's a natural progression of the show. The show is growing. You know, the fights are getting better. You know, the interest level is getting higher.
So now that you're doing this, commentary, what do you think about UFC 214 this weekend? Cormier and Jones. We got to know what you think about that.
I think that's going to be a great fight. I watched the first fight. I thought the first fight was a great fight to the end. I like the way Jones took advantage of the third, fourth, and the fifth rounds. I think this is going to be a better fight because it's a lot at stake. You know, Skinny Bones Jones is back in the ring, finally off suspension.
Snoop's on TMZ right
Cormier been talking a lot of mess about him messing up outside of the ring, so now they get a chance to get back in the ring and see what he does.
20 seconds till you're on, Steve. 20 seconds. Take a quick break.
Give me a second.
You got it, Snoop. Oh, what a character that guy is. And he's absolutely right about that fight. I loved his comment about Jones finally getting out of the soup kitchen. That was pretty nice. But that's it for Butthurt of the Week. Not so much a butthurt on the last one there, but I think a little fun to keep track of. And if you get a chance, check out Uriah and Snoop there doing some of those fights, because I got a funny feeling that it won't quite be the same feel you get, watching a Rogan fight or a Brian Stan fight or something like that. That's a Mount Rushmore. You got Rogan, Stan, and Snoop. All right, time to go right now to real world news. Well, my real world news this week is going to start off in the world of sports again, and specifically the world of football, where new facilities and spending is ongoing. You got to do that to compete. And Texas, University of Texas, the Longhorns, Brian Jones, got to put up his hook'em and all that other fun stuff about his Texas football team. But they had a little attention this last week in that their new locker room was opened up. And it was announced that those lockers, as in when I say those lockers, and there's 120-something of them, or 130 of them if they give every player and walk-on and everybody else a locker, were built at an expense of $10,000 per locker. That wasn't $10,000 on the locker room. That's $10,000 on a locker. Now, those look nice. That looks like a pretty good scene. Now, that's got to be so electronic. Everything's got to be, you just put your phone in your pants, hang them up, and they should charge your phone for you while you're doing it. They've got everything. They've got little TVs. They've got audio hookups. They're ready. Texas has got that. But I mentioned that spending to really take a look at another story. The University of Alabama, Birmingham, they didn't have a football team for a couple of years. They literally dropped football. And I think from a school standpoint, it was lack of commitment and lack of interest. They didn't want to have a football team. And if you've ever seen or have ever seen the old facilities, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of high schools that would have been embarrassed to be playing in their old facility. Well, that isn't the case right now for the UAB football team and their new coach, Bill Clark. They have built this state-of-the-art, beautiful practice, locker room, offices, everything these football players need at UAB. And you'll see a couple of shots here of the construction as it's obviously still ongoing. I feel good for these young men. There are a lot of great kids that have come back now that were in that program, now that they do have a football team again, and they're giving them the kind of facilities that you have to have if you're going to recruit. If you're going to compete against the teams that they compete with, you've got to have those kind of facilities. And that's usually paid for, by the way, by donors and outside interests. That's usually not paid off your tuition money. So, I think a lot of people get very outraged when they build these kind of facilities, but you shouldn't be, because the majority of this money is donated. And I mentioned that to mention this. And that's my football team, the UCLA Bruins, are going to have a new football facility out in Westwood. The Wasserman Football Center is going to be the name of it. There are some artist renderings and pictures that really don't do it that much justice. There it is, there, adjacent right to the football team. Basically hangs out, overlooks the football field at that level. There's more levels down below it. It's going to have this. This is just the weight room part of it, if you can believe it. But again, these are the kind of things. Donations come in, success is had. Jim Moore has done a pretty good job at UCLA. He's in a situation where he better have a good year this year. But those are the kind of facilities. I'm proud that my old school has built that. And they continue to raise a whole heck of a lot of money. Next one up on our hit parade is a little international news. And it's something that has happened a couple of times on and off in the last 20 years in a nation like Afghanistan. Afghanistan, having been there too before, back several years ago when there was actually a recognized thing as the Afghanistan War, the Taliban had taken away infrastructure. They had taken away electronics. They had taken away everything. They'd put everybody in those burqas, all the women in the burqas. The women have no rights, none, zero. And I think one of the great results, and it's flip-flopped a couple times, that has happened when either the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or ISIS, whoever is taken out of there, the women celebrate. And the number one way they celebrate in their local areas and villages when they get freed, they celebrate like these women did in Raqqa, the former ISIS stronghold in Syria, because they no longer had to wear their hijabs, the burqas. And they made a little bonfire. Good for them. Now, you got to understand, too, how much bravery this takes on these women's behalfs. Because ISIS has video. ISIS has YouTube. ISIS will get this. They'll identify those people. And if they ever get back in charge, there's going to be hell to pay. So hats off to those women celebrating and burning their burqas. Because that's a sign, I think, to all of us from the outside looking in, that maybe they get some decent human rights from the woman's standpoint, and they basically can go back to recognizing the great contributions women make in our society, and now, hopefully, for an extended period of time, in their society. Next up on our real world news is a little reminder, I think, out there. Football starting. The NFL training camps are coming up. Football is a matter of the line of scrimmage. I don't care how many quarterbacks are going to tell you, oh, yeah, that's important, but, it's Star Wars. Well, you know what? It's all basically meat and potatoes. If you don't win up front, you don't win. And New England won the Super Bowl last year, came back from a 28-3 deficit due to a lot of things. Tom Brady was one of the things. The defense was another one of the things. The offensive toys, skill positions, that was a thing. But their offensive line is highly underrated. But one guy that is not highly underrated is the guy, a nickname there, Scar. See the short little guy there in the dark shirt? That's Dante Scarnecchia. That is, and has been for the last decade or so, the best offensive line coach in football. Number one. He's all about the techniques. He makes guys better. In that article that was written, it was the contributor, the former player, was Sebastian Vollmer, who had come to the Patriots very raw, very inexperienced. He's a former offensive lineman now because of injuries. But I just like to recognize guys like that. There's tons of them in the college game. There's tons of them in the high school game. There's tons of them even in the NFL. But Dante Scarnecchia is a guy that's worth recognizing currently as the best, because that's right where, in my mind, he sits in this current constellation of offensive line coaches, and that's a term you never hear to get together, constellation and offensive line coaches. Okay, now this was a boondoggle. This was false advertising. This was fake TV. This was reality TV that turned into virtual reality TV. What am I talking about? The kickoff to Shark Week on Discovery. Michael Phelps versus the Shark. Now, here is how they sold it.
One trained to be the best since the day he was born. The other has been perfected by evolution. The great white shark meets the greatest of all time. Phelps versus Shark. The battle for ocean supremacy starts Sunday, July 23rd at 8 on Discovery, and watch live on the Discovery Go app.
Ready? Swimmers, take your mark. Go!
Oh, no, they didn't. If you were watching like I did, it was Michael Phelps into the water, and suddenly a virtual CGI shark appears next to him. Now, if you had tuned in expecting to see a real shark the way it was sold, what in the hell is this? There's Phelps going with his fin, and how does the shark win? Why, of course, he breaches. You've got to be kidding. Discovery, you should be ashamed of yourself. Michael, you got paid, but Discovery, you should be ashamed of yourself, and that's what people said. I felt like I got robbed. Watch a stupid hour. Michael Phelps races a fake shark. Hannah, I'm right with you. Cole, Michael Phelps has been hyping up that he's going to race a shark for months. And tonight it was a damn CGI shark. And they didn't take my suggestion, was to slit the bottoms of Phelps' feet and get a little blood in the water. Would have made the race a lot more interesting. A computer-generated shark. This is going to go down in one of TV's most hyped embarrassments and flops. Man, you really, Discovery, should be very, very embarrassed. That's false advertising. That's malarkey. That's a lot of things I can't say because I get kind of paid to talk for a living. Okay, last up on our real world news is again from the world of sports. We got a lot of sports dabbled in here. And it's something you can see on ESPN quite a bit, and you can see on TV a lot. That's the World Series of Poker. And in case you didn't catch it earlier this week or during last week, poker was big. And how big is big? You win poker this year, a 25-year-old, $8.15 million. Unbelievable. Of course, in the game he was playing, he had acquired, I believe, right around $300 million in chips by the time it came down to two guys. So he'd basically gotten most of everybody else's chips and was able to win the contest. But he walks away with $8.1 million. God bless you. Good on you. Have a great time. You get all kinds of neat stuff. I mean, they give you rings and they give you bracelets and they give you, you're a world champion. Maybe even give you a belt buckle. I mean, because who couldn't use a real good belt buckle every once in a while? All right, that'll do it for real world news, and that'll lead us into, it's coming. That's a tinfoil hat. Yeah, we've got a few tinfoil hat stories for you, and it doesn't always have to involve aliens or ancient aliens or even celestial happenings for that matter. This first one involves a recently sainted individual. Remember Mother Teresa? Worked in the slums of Calcutta. Just did amazing work through the course of her entire life and recently was sainted. And not too often you can say, I lived during a time where there was actually a saint alive and doing their work. But that was the case with Mother Teresa. Now, recently, a tree was found. And we mentioned the Mother Teresa part because you got to get that mental picture of what Mother Teresa looked like. So check this out. This exposed wood, it looks like a limb came down, which tore off a part of the bark and stuff. Now, on the left is Mother Teresa. On the right is what is being hailed by the locals as a miracle. That is, it is a reproduction in the tree of Mother Teresa. Now, something like this happens when suddenly you have people making pilgrimages to the tree. So, in case you're going, there's the tree and there's the location. And locally, they believe that's a picture of Mother Teresa. God bless you. Good work. I don't know if I'm going. I think maybe I'm not. But it does look a little bit like Mother Teresa. All right, next up on Tinfoil Hat. Do you remember we talked a little bit about the inserts, the little implants into your hands and identifying yourself with a chip? And there is some biblical reference with all this mark of the devil and all this other stuff that people will go crazy about this on. That's why it's in tinfoil hats. Well, if the chip in your hand freaked you out, like it freaked me out, you're going to be nuts about this story. I was kind of sure they were doing some of this work. But when I saw this article that they have the first human embryos that have been edited, genetically edited. They have edited the DNA and improved it on human embryos. Does that scare anybody else? Is that a crazy story or what? First known attempt at creating genetically modified human embryos, and it's been carried out and it's been successful. They can take the embryo to a certain term and then they don't want to deal with the consequences, obviously, that you're going to see, or they say they're not dealing with the consequences. But I will reference here, we'll play a video, a movie a few years ago, The Island. Check this out. This should scare you. This is the next step.
Oh, so seriously, guys, unless you want to see me blow chunks, can you wait till I'm gone?
Sever the umbilical.
Cut it.
Yeah. I went there. Yeah. Can you imagine that? That's where that leads. Now, currently, that's, I believe, illegal. But being illegal never stops everybody. We're getting scary. All I'll say is it's not all about the Bible, but there are certain parts of the Bible that does refer to stuff like this during the end times. That's all I'm saying. Just Go ahead and check it out. Make your own decision for yourself. Next up, it's a revisit, I should say. Last week, we ran a little thing about alien ships that were coming out of a mountain in Washington. Mount Adams. Well, Mount Adams kind of got back in the news this week, and they made a big deal about that strange hole in Mount Adams. Now, I would like to add a little bit of reality to this story. When you start seeing these pictures and you start listening to their descriptions, keep in mind this is a cave in the side of a mountain that's pretty big, and it's in an area where there is an occasional earthquake or so and seismic activity that could knock some stuff loose. So check this out.
This next shot, Jason took with his high-res camera.
Good for you, Jason.
And you're looking at it here. Here is the enlargement. Look at the opening. It's absolutely incredible. We went through some historic shots. Here's one with snow covering the face. There is clearly no opening here.
It snowed on the mountain?
In this next shot, this is from Horse Camp, which is a few miles closer, about 9 miles out. And you can see that it's a clearer shot, and it's closer to the mountain. Everything that you have seen that we took here is about 13 to 14 miles away from the mountain.
Oh.
The mountain itself is about 12,300 feet tall from sea level.
So climbing.
And here it's about 8,000 to 9,000 feet above ground level. The opening just appeared. We can't tell how large it is. We are guessing from the size of the mountain and from the distance. It's anywhere from a couple of 100 feet, maybe a few 500 feet wide, a couple of 100 feet tall, possibly. We don't know. One thing is for sure.
What's for sure?
Clearly is an opening. Is it a cave? Is it a hangar door?
No.
Is it something that a UFO or some kind of ET craft can enter and leave?
Oh, hell no. It's not that. I got a suggestion for these guys. Just real quick. Why don't you climb it? Go up there, check it out. And if you're really high-techy, climb halfway up and drone it up, use a drone and fly a drone up there into the cave and see what the hell it is. Because I don't know, it's probably a cave in a mountain. Man, too much time on your hands. Too much time down there in the flatlands staring up at that one mountain. That's all I got to tell you. Hey, Russia's been in the news big time. And that's our final story here in Tinfoil Hat. And that is, we've heard a lot about Russian influence and things like elections and Russian influence and, the Putin effect, which is people tend to show up dead eventually after challenging this guy. But another Russian, and this is a proven story, so there is no fake news here, is that now that news is starting to get out a little bit more out of Russia about what went on over the years, over the decades, as far as studying the space agencies and studying space and, yes, studying visitations from ancient aliens. Several crashed UFOs.
Specialist researchers in Volgograd, Russia, have discovered over a dozen ancient disc-shaped objects, which they strongly believe to be the remnants of several crashed UFOs, including one object which is over 4 meters in diameter. According to experts, these strange, out-of-place discs are coated in a thick layer of tungsten, a high-density metal often used in military technology. Cosmopoisk, the team who made the discovery, is a notorious Russian UFO and cryptozoology research group.
There you go. So there are several alien spacecraft. Now they said that was about 4 meters across. So I'll do my gazintas real quick in my head. That makes it 4 meters, about 12 feet or so, roughly. That's a small spaceship. Those are some small aliens. That's a lot of trouble. And that's a big one? I love it. So there's your real Russian news, where it should be, on the important stories. That'll do it for Tinfoil Hat. We'll move right into the basically the final segment, and that's the feel-good story. We did a feel-good story, I believe, last week with Garth Brooks, and where he and Trisha Yearwood donated basically a honeymoon in Hawaii to a couple that were at one of their concerts. And again, Garth Brooks is going to make a repeat visitation to the feel-good story of the week, just based on what he did again in a concert. And I could describe it, but honestly, the best thing to do is just to watch his reaction when he saw this sign that said chemo this morning, Garth tonight, and he did some amazing stuff again. How great is that? I know there's skeptics out there that, doubt sincerity on people when they do stuff like that. That is spontaneous. So chemo this morning, Garth tonight, enjoying the dance. And that was Garth Brooks' huge hit, The Dance. And he gives her his guitar. And the best is at the end here.
Sometimes, man, I'm one of those guys that said, man, if God would just get a big old hand that comes out from the sky and writes, I exist, then there would never be any doubt, right? Well, I want to tell you right now, God just stuck his hand out, and he wrote, you have all of my strength, you have everybody's strength in here, and you go kick cancer's ass.
You go kick cancer's ass. All right. That'll do it this week for Unsafe Spaces. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate you watching. Any suggestions, again, from a segment standpoint, what stories you want to see on the show, it's producer at unsafespacesusa.com. And social media, you can now get us. We're on SoundCloud, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, iTunes. We're going at a pretty good clip. Again, like to have you spread it around, tell as many people as you can, share this podcast with friends and family, and that's how we're all going to get started, all right? So we end this show with our usual collection of video highlights, and happy trails.
Happy trails to you until